Welcome back to the Future of QMS Requirements True Quality Summit series. We have the pleasure of hearing from Alireza Hamadi from TÜV Süd about the eMDR program and processes. This session will run for about 35 minutes with a 10-minute Q&A at the end. Any questions that come up throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask in the Q&A section of the chat on the right-hand side. We will get to as many of those as we possibly can during our Q&A session. Alireza has been with TÜV Süd since January 2020 as a product assessment expert. In this role, he's involved with technical document assessments and audits for active implantable medical devices. He graduated with his bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering from Tehran Polytechnic University in Iran and his master's degree in bioengineering from the University of Denver. Prior to working at TÜV Süd, he was employed on the industry side as a systems engineer for implantable neurostimulator medical devices. We're excited to have you join us today.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for joining the session. As Jessica mentioned, I'm Alireza, and today we're going to talk about electronic MDR or eMDR program and process. I'm going to focus on the why, the what, the who, and the how of eMDR. We'll start with the value of medical device reports, as well as establishing FDA's authority. The what MDR reportable events are, the who needs to report these events to FDA, and how you would do that using the eMDR submission process. At the end, I have included a few links of resources that link you to FDA's website, guidance documents, instructions that you can use for setting up your eMDR system. All right, before we begin, it's important to highlight the value of medical device reports. Information of medical device adverse events benefit everyone, including consumers, industry, and industry, of course. Consumers can be empowered to make educated decisions about their healthcare, and industry may use this information to improve the design and safety of their products over time. As a regulatory agency, FDA is particularly interested in understanding how medical devices perform once they are in the market. This allows the agency to monitor device safety and determine when regulatory intervention may be necessary to mitigate serious concerns. Some of these regulatory actions could be FDA inspection of manufacturer, changes to device labeling, notices to public, and device recalls. FDA's regulatory authority stems from the U.S. Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Section 519. It pertains specifically to records and reports on medical devices and grants FDA the authority to require medical device manufacturers, importers, and device facility users to accept these medical device reports. The medical device reporting regulation specifically is in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR Part 803, and it establishes how adverse events involving medical devices can be reported to FDA. It also defines important reporting roles, responsibilities, and deadlines. Based on the 21 CFR 803, the MDR reportable event is an event that reasonably suggests a marketed device either may have caused or contributed to a death or a serious injury, or that the marketed device malfunctioned and it's likely to cause or contribute to death or serious injury were it to occur again. Sorry about that. And here we have some definitions on malfunction. It's the failure of a device to meet its performance specifications or otherwise perform as intended. and includes all claims made in the labeling for the device. Serious injury refers to an injury or illness that's life-threatening or results in permanent impairment of a body function or permanent damage to a body structure and necessitates medical or surgical intervention. So as for the WHO, we have mandatory and voluntary reporters. I'll just quickly mention the voluntary reporters. These are patients, healthcare professionals, and caregivers, and they can do so. They can report using MedWatch online or by postal mail using Form 3500 or 3500B, available on FDA's website. Here today, of course, we're focusing on mandatory reporters. These are divided into manufacturers, importers, and device user facilities. The regulation, of course, defines these terms. Manufacturer is defined as any person who manufactures, prepares, propagates, compounds, assembles, or processes a device by chemical, physical, biological, or other means. This includes domestic manufacturers, contract manufacturers, specification developers, foreign manufacturers, repackagers, and relabelers. This is important because repackagers and relabelers are not often thought of manufacturers, but FDA includes them in this definition. And therefore, the eMDR requirements for manufacturers apply to them. Importer means any person who imports a device into the US and furthers the marketing of the device from the original place of manufacture to the person who makes final delivery or sale. But they do not repackage or otherwise change the container, device, label, wrapper, or package. And device user facilities are facilities like hospitals, nursing homes, outpatient treatment facilities. However, physicians' offices, school nurse offices, and employee health units are not device user facilities. This is also important to mention that a MDR report does not constitute an admission that the device reporting entity or the entity's employee caused or contributed to the reportable event. This is important. This is an important disclaimer because without it, FDA would probably won't receive enough MDR reports in order to conduct post-market trending and carry out its mission of protecting the US public health. So in terms of these mandatory reporters, manufacturers and importers now are required to submit MDRs electronically. And they use the eMDR final rule, which was effective, which became effective on August 14, 2015. Device user facilities are encouraged to use electronic submission form, but they are permitted to use written forms as well. This is a summary of what needs to be reported and the timelines. So manufacturers have 30 days to report deaths, serious injuries, and malfunctions to FDA. And these are, of course, as I mentioned, it's going to be online, and they have 5-day reports for an event designated by FDA or an event that requires remedial action to prevent an unreasonable risk of substantial harm to the public health. So they have a 30-day and 5-day requirements. Importers also have 30 calendar days to report events, depending on what it is, to either FDA and manufacturer or the manufacturer alone. As for user facilities, they also have 10 working days of being aware to report to FDA and manufacturer for device-related deaths and device-related serious injury. For annual summary of death and serious injury report, they submitted by January 1st of the preceding year, and they submitted to FDA only. So how to enroll an eMDR, the electronic MDR program. Final rule that, as I mentioned, came into effect in 2015 did not change what must be included in an MDR report or when the report should be submitted. The primary change is that is the method of submitting MDRs to FDA, which has changed for manufacturers and importers from paper to electronic method. This final rule also made changes to record-keeping requirements. The final rule amended Part 803 to require eMDR submitters to retain all paper or electronic copies of the eMDR submitted. Please note that firm may choose whether the copies are retained via paper or electronic means. Furthermore, all acknowledgements that FDA sends to manufacturers need to be retained. eMDRs that are submitted to the FDA are received by the Electronic Submission Gateway, ESG. ESG is the central transmission point for sending information electronically to the FDA. In addition, the ESG acts as a secure entry point for all electronic submissions sent to the FDA and then relays the product-specific report to the appropriate FDA center, which in the case for eMDR is CDRH, the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Now that we have a better understanding of what ESG is, we will delve into what happens next. Once the eMDR is received by ESG, then it will automatically send acknowledgement 1 to the submitter, and acknowledgement 1 indicates that eMDR submission was received by FDA ESG. The eMDR report is then sent to CDRH database, where it automatically sends acknowledgement 2, indicating that the eMDR submission has reached CDRH. The next one is, the next step is that the CDRH database will attempt to load the eMDR report into the adverse event database. At this point, the database will automatically send acknowledgement 3 to the submitter to indicate the pass or failure status of the submitted eMDR. If there are no errors, the 3 acknowledgement letters will be generated within 24 hours of submission. As I stated before, the requirements of the final rule from 2015 requires manufacturers and importers, basically all submitters, to retain these acknowledgements. In general, there are 2 methods of submitting eMDRs to FDA. The first method is via eSubmitter, and it is for low volume submitters. eSubmitter is supplied by FDA. It's a free software, allows reporters to submit eMDRs individually. You can download it in FDA. It acts as a standard software that eases the technical eMDR reporting burden on manufacturers and importers. It also generates an electronic version of FDA Form 3500A in zip file format, which is then sent to FDA via ESG. It also allows submitters to include attachments in their eMDR submission. The second method is for high volume submitters. For high volume submitters, they use their own AS2 gateway software system. It basically is the B2B communication system that they have. They generate HL7. They use HL7 standard files. HL7 is the standard for the capture of the information needed to support the submission of MDR reportable events. It allows reporters to extract information directly from the reporter's database. The reporters complaint system or vigilance case system. And it uses that database to populate an eMDR submission. HL7 therefore allows eMDRs to be submitted in large batches or even one at a time, depending on the reporter's preference. Submitters using the AS2 gateway interface will be required to develop or purchase a AS2 submission system capable of generating HL7 ICSR, which stands for Individual Case Safety Report. And this AS2 gateway basically allows them to submit the eMDR to ESG. So the FDA's website talks about the process of enrollment for low volume and high volume submitters. It goes further in detail. This is an abbreviated version. I know it's still not that abbreviated, it's word heavy. Now, what I've done is that I've included hyperlinks here that you can use to get more detailed information. But basically for low volume enrollment process, you have 5 steps. You obtain a pre-production web trader account from ESG. You can follow the instructions in the link provided there and set up your web trader account. You will note that there are preparatory activities such as obtaining a digital certificate that you will have to perform in order to set up a production account. The next step is preparing a guidance compliant test submission for eMDR. You download this eSubmitter application and then install it, open the application, create new submission, and it's basically just a test submission. And you use a fictional adverse event. Step 3 is send a guidance compliant test submission to eMDR. You log into your pre-production web trader account and follow the instructions to submit that test submission. You request low volume eMDR approval. Once you have successfully completed the guidance compliant test submission, you will send an email to eMDR help desk following the instructions provided in the website. And the last step is send the submissions to production eMDR. This is after you have received that approval, and then you basically send your event submissions individually as they come up. For high volume process, enrollment process, there are a few more steps. You begin with software acquisition or development. It depends on the submitter. Then if you decide to move with the development, please refer to this eMDR implementation package link that describes the HL7 ICSR XML message expected by eMDR. And this ESG guide describes the headers and other transport layer configuration needed to submit a file for ESG's AS2 gateway. You will schedule a final hull volume testing and approval. You initiate that by sending an email to emdr@fda.hhs.gov, notifying them of your intent, and then they will send you a response confirming the receipt. You will obtain pre-production ESG account using the same web trader as discussed earlier. You will perform initial hull volume testing using your pre-production ESG account. You will submit a final hull volume guidance compliant test. This is similar to what we discussed earlier. You request high volume eMDR approval. Here you will need to send an email to eMDR help desk. They will manually review your test submissions and notify you to resubmit if there are any discrepancies. Once all the issues and concerns are addressed, you will receive the approval email. And then you start using your submission platform for using batched or individual cases. These are some of the resources that can guide you through this process, and I've used them in this presentation. I found them actually very detailed and helpful, so definitely take a look at them. And thank you for your attention. I think we're ready for questions.
Awesome. I really, truly appreciate you going through this topic. We do have a couple of questions on here, specifically around the low volume and high volume. One, is there a definition of what low volume and high volume is?
So I didn't see a specific low volume or high volume definition. I know that both options are available for all submitters. So it depends on what that specific submitter's needs are. There are benefits to low volume submission because it's they get the software from FDA, it's free, it's ready to go. But you have to submit each event individually, and you have to enter that information manually in that software and on eSubmitter. For high volume submitters, you can basically export the currently existing information in your complaint handling system, export it and submit it to FDA, but you have to have that AS2 gateway platform. It's not something that FDA provides. So the manufacturer, the submitter, needs to make a decision whether they want to purchase it or develop it internally. Of course, other than the cost, it requires validation activities as well. So they have to validate the system and show validation results to FDA to make sure that all of the required information, all of the required events are being reported and all of the required information is included. So it is the submitter's preference.
Okay. Yeah, we had several questions around trying to understand the low volume versus the high volume, and really just knowing that it's the submitter's preference, I think answers a lot of those questions. We also had some questions around who actually is going through and submitting. So at the manufacturer, typically, who is the one who is submitting the EUMDR? Or sorry, we've got the eMDR. We had several conversations on the EUMDR earlier. For the eMDR, who is going through and actually submitting that at the manufacturer?
Actually, because I work for a European notified body, I would have more information on the EUMDR side. But I do audit manufacturers, and I'm an MDSAP auditor, so we have to meet the requirements for FDA. Adverse events as well, we audit those. My experience is that the submission is part of it's a collaborative effort between the regulatory side and the quality side. Of course, the quality and complaint handling individuals and groups receive these complaints, they enter it into internal complaint handling system. And then the regulatory side help them determine what is the procedure for adverse events reporting, what is considered a reportable event. So their regulatory individuals help and create those procedures, and also help the quality team with geography related requirements. Here for FDA, they will make the determination of what sorts of events are considered reportable. And then this development, I don't know where the development of software actually happens, because that's on the technical side of the manufacturer. But basically, that's the submission side is a collaborative effort between the regulatory and quality.
Awesome. A question around the annual report. So it obviously makes sense. You know, we're doing this annually now. When we talk about annual, does that mean that like at the end of December every year, or like if I registered with the FDA in April, is my annual report then on April every year? Trying to understand when you talk about the annual report for doing that.
Let me get
It looks like it was on your last slide that you had just done for the
yes.
user facilities.
This is for user facilities, and they, of course, they are required to submit specific events that are that have unfortunately ended up in death or serious injury. There's a 10 working day requirement there. For annual summary, here it says January 1st of the preceding for the preceding year.
That's for the user facilities. Do you have a similar one for the manufacturer as well?
Let's see. I am not sure for manufacturers. I can look that up, but I don't know on top of my head right now.
Awesome.
So annual submissions for manufacturers. I'm not sure if there's such a requirement, but I
yeah,
have to.
I think they had seen the question coming in terms of with seeing it for the user facility, and was curious if there was something for the manufacturers and importers. For the user facility, if there are no reportable events that year, for the annual summary, do they still have to submit something that says, hey, there was nothing? Or can they skip it for that year?
That is, again, something that I don't know. In terms of the requirements, I will look it up. Definitely the guidance itself provides clear guidance there. As an auditor, I would say that if I'm auditing a facility, even if they don't have any reportable events, I would expect to see some sort of documented evidence to show that they have communicated that to regulatory bodies. That would be my initial impression and expectation, but definitely I will look into the final rule and see what the exact requirement. Actually, not the final rule. Final rule is the final rule stated here, the eMDR one, is specifically related to e-submission, but MDR reportable guidance, I have it here, mandatory reporting requirements, manufacturers, importers, and device user facilities. This guidance document should specifically mention whether that's a requirement or not. I personally suggest having that document at hand, release it in your quality management system, even if FDA is not requiring to send it in.
Awesome. And we've got one last question. In terms of enrolling in the eMDR program, do you recommend that manufacturers enroll in the program as soon as they start selling, just to be ready, just in case, or is there some? Are they able to delay enrolling until they actually get that first event that needs to be reported?
No, I would definitely recommend starting the process and enrolling as soon as you can, because as we discussed, there are multiple steps. And for low volume enrollment, it would be a quicker process because you're using an existing e-submitter application. However, for high volume enrollment, the testing and validation process can be time consuming. So if you're planning on using high volume, definitely start planning for it and enrolling as soon as you can. For a low volume, again, there is some testing submission done. It basically it allows FDA to determine whether you are gathering all the required information from your patients, from people who are experiencing, patients or physicians who are experiencing these adverse events. So if you, let's say for any reason, you are missing a required piece of information, it's good to know that first thing.
Awesome. And we actually had one of our audience members chime in around the instructions for completing the medical device reporting annual user facility report form,
Awesome.
FDA 3419. It does indicate that when there are no events, that no report is required. So we definitely appreciate having our audience chime in and help us answer that. I know that's always a frequent question, regardless of what it is that you are doing when it comes to any kind of regulatory thing. Can I skip it? Do I have to document it? So really appreciate the audience helping out there.
Absolutely, yeah. I appreciate that too. As I mentioned earlier, my focus is mostly on the EU MDR side of things, but we audit for MDSAP and we look into the requirements there. So speaking of MDSAP, I would highly recommend that manufacturers, importers go through the MDSAP guidance document. The MDSAP, what do they call it? It's not audit approach anymore. The MDSAP document, it's on FDA's website. The chapter 4, it's on adverse events reporting. It has a specific requirements, of course, for FDA. But if you are a manufacturer that sells products in Brazil, Japan, Canada, and Australia, it provides additional country specific for those geographies in terms of reporting. And that is where that regulatory personnel come in handy because they can help the complaint handling and quality system, quality assurance individuals determine which type of events are reportable to which geography.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely encourage everyone to go and check that out. Now, a couple of other questions have been coming in as well. So we always talk about, within the becoming aware of these particular events. In terms of this, the user facility, if this is a hospital, becoming aware of a patient death from a device-related death, obviously is something that you're going to be aware of relatively quickly. From the manufacturer standpoint or from an importer standpoint, what are some recommendations maybe on helping you keep track of some of these events that may have occurred? Maybe it gets reported from the user facility. How do you ensure that you're staying on top of that as a manufacturer, as an importer as well?
I can speak to that in terms of what I've seen during audits. During audits of, let's say, complaints, I actually see a lot of times physicians of patients have reached out and submitted a complaint, or sometimes even patients have directly contacted the manufacturer. Sales personnel play a huge part here, and of course they're obligated to relay that information, complaint, as soon as they are aware they receive it. They have a more direct contact with physicians, with user facilities, with patients. So I think the most important part is focusing on your sales individuals to make sure they are trained appropriately, they know the requirements around this, and they relay the complaints as soon as possible to you, so you can document it and then start the process for reporting it. Depending on your device, of course, you can always, some devices, let's say ICDs and CRTDs, cardiac devices, they have monitoring systems that live off of network. They just provide information to the network, and the manufacturers has access to de-identified information. So they see the function of serial number, blah, 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 during time, and they can actually detect issues there. So that's another data input, data source. Speaking of specific patient-specific items, well, you are kind of waiting to receive that complaint from either the end user, patient, physician, or your salespeople. But you also have your trending information at all times. During your management reviews, you can look into trendings. If you see an issue that is a red flag, you can definitely look into that and see if you determine it to be a reportable item. Because remember, we have two types of reportable events. One that is related to an actual harm here. So that a device malfunction has caused or contributed to death or serious injury, and the other one is malfunction, but it is likely to cause or contribute if it were to recur. So you also can look into your trendings and see if there is something something that could potentially contribute to a serious injury later on.
That is definitely a great point. I think many of us tend to forget about the second side of that, with it likely to cause or contribute. So certainly something for our risk management activities as well, making sure that we are appropriately evaluating that. This last topic has kind of introduced a new question. In terms of this, when we're going through, what do you see in terms of your audit experience as typically some of the challenges with being able to identify whether or not that second option for reportable events, that it was likely to cause or contribute to death? What do you see as some of the issues from your auditing around being able to report those?
That's a great question. I've actually seen it a couple of times. I think the most important item is to have clear guidance and procedure. Because as I mentioned, most manufacturers don't just market their devices in the US. They market in multiple geographies, different countries, different regulatory schemes. So for that individual handling the complaints, making that determination whether or not it's reportable to different geographies it's not an easy task. There has to be a defined procedure. It has to be, these individuals have to be trained on, and we have to make sure that that training is effective. What we see, not only specific to this topic, but sometimes we have training material, we have a document, we have a process. The individual reads it and they sign off on it or take a test. That doesn't necessarily mean it's an effective training. Please, please, please make sure that your trainings are effective, and that the individual feels competent and comfortable performing their task, whatever that is. And here, I believe having a clear procedure really helps. And of course, communication between the regulatory and the operations, the quality side of things, I think it's very important.
Very much so. To your point, especially around the training, we want to make sure that everybody does feel comfortable, that they do feel competent doing that. In terms of your biggest takeaway, what would you hope that everyone would maybe now be aware of for the eMDR, or something that you hope that if they don't remember anything else, that they take away from this particular presentation?
Of course. So I would say this topic of low volume versus high volume was new to me because, as I said, I review the submitted information to FDA. I hadn't previously looked into how the submission practically occurs. So that was new to me. If you haven't done this, please spend time on difficult word for me, familiarizing yourself to this process, make a determination whether you want to go with low volume or high volume, and depending on which way you want to go, start a preparation. And I think even more importantly is the procedure and definition of what a reportable event is. Because at the end of the day, we talk about the systems, we talk about procedures, we talk about what's submitted or not. At the end of the day, our end goal is safety for patients. So we want to make sure that if there is any issue here, it's reported so we can keep records of it, address it. The last point that I would mention is that, as I said earlier, submitting a reportable event is not a, it's not a confession that the manufacturer or their employees is responsible and the harm caused. Of course, that's a separate process, procedure, there's investigation if it goes there, but this reporting is first mandatory, and second, it doesn't necessarily mean you're saying that I'm responsible for this event.
Yeah, I definitely think that's an important thing for us to remember and really appreciate those key takeaways. And with that, we are at time. Thank you so much for all of the information going in and giving us all of these details. And thank you everybody for joining us. Don't forget, we have our 2023 State of the Med Tech Industry Survey out right now. There is a link in the chat. Be sure to take the survey. You'll enter for a chance to win $100 and donate $100 to Project Cure. So again, that link is in the chat. And this has been a fantastic day of sessions as part of the virtual summit. We do look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern for our first session of day 2. So check out the website to see all of the presentations that will be going on tomorrow.
Thank you.